Hello, welcome to the Hoop Collective podcast. We talk about the NBA, which we're doing on Thursday afternoon. Joining me from New York City, I believe he went to the Knicks-Rockets game on Wednesday night, which the Knicks won, is Tim Bontemps.
It's true. It was a Knicks Rockets on Wednesday. We're going to be at Knicks Wizards Thursday night. Both probably not quite as good as the two Denver games. One I saw on Tuesday in Philly, and one I'll see on Friday in Boston. Probably won't be quite the same level.
What a time to spend extra days in the Northeast. Got to be great. Joining us from Dallas, Texas. I don't know the last game you went to. Ben MacMahon.
Howdy, partners. Hey, the Mavs just finished a 7-game homestand. I mean, it's not exactly the Bontemps schedule, but I've been working. Listen, there's nothing more exciting than the windy sleep updates, but the Bontemps schedule updates rank right below. Really, really close.
Very exciting.
I was just trying to preview later in the pod. That's all.
The Mavericks went to the West Coast and got a rude awakening from the resurgent Lakers.
Ooh.
So we had a significant trade, major trade. I see people saying blockbuster. I have a high standard for blockbuster.
I mean, he's an all-NBA forward.
I mean, it gets 2-time All-NBA.
What classifies as a blockbuster trade? What's your threshold?
I don't know.
You got to be as good as Pascal Siakam. I think that's a good baseline for it.
I feel like 2-time All-NBA, still in prime. It's at least a buster trade.
Well, I think you can tell the level of the trade by how nice the private jet is that comes to get the player. Because I was seeing the footage of the jet that flew Pascal from Toronto to Indiana. It was a beautiful plane, but like the Harden jet last year, where Daryl greeted him on the tarmac. The Harden jet. If I was Pascal, I'd have said, I want a blockbuster jet. I want the G6.
First of all,
don't give me the Hawker.
It's not based on the level of trade. It's based how rich the freaking owner of the team that traded for the guy is. I mean, give me a break. You think you think that that the Pacers are sending a lesser jet for if they've traded for OG Anunoby? You think you would have gotten a lesser jet?
Honestly, I'm just making a joke. I'm making a reference to the Jets.
I mean, Pascal Siakam might be the best player the Pacers ever traded for, right?
Sir, he's not the best player on the roster that they've traded for, you buffoon. Tyrese Halliburton.
Well, but I'm saying at the time of the trade, like Halliburton hadn't made an all-star team yet. Like Siakam's got, like you said, Siakam's a 2-time all-star, 2-time All-NBA player. Like,
all right, you're saying that he's the most decorated player at the time of the trade.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Listen, 2-time All-NBA player, 3 first-round picks, with some asterisks involved are involved. We can call it a blockbuster. Let's get excited about it. Come on.
All right. Well, it's certainly big for the Pacers, who, they're in 7th place, but the standings in the East are pretty packed. And when Halliburton comes back, Siakam, he is a guy who thrives in transition.
Ooh.
And obviously Halliburton, I think we got the numbers from SIG. The Pacers lead the league in transition points, and Halliburton has 88 assists in transition, which are the most of any player in the league. And he's obviously missed some time here. Siakam was the highest transition player on the Raptors. So
Halliburton, by the way, is questionable to play Thursday. I don't think he's playing Thursday, but it seems like he's going to be back fairly soon from this hamstring injury, which is very good news.
This was very good news. Siakam has 170 points in transition, 3rd most in the NBA. So if you already didn't think that the Pacers were must-see with when they've got the ball, I mean, they are going to fly up and down the court, and I think Pascal and Halliburton are going to love playing with each other. I absolutely think it was a worthwhile trade for the Pacers. The 2 picks that they gave in the 2024 draft. Now, look, somebody may take a pick in the 20s in this draft and may end up drafting a Hall of Famer. Every year, there are good players in the draft. However, right now, teams are not valuing 2024 picks very highly. Mm-hmm. So if you say he got traded for 3 first-round picks and just leave it at that, it's not really building in the nuance. It's not like Drew Holiday getting traded for 3 unprotected Bucks picks for when, Giannis is going to be in his 30s or, whatever, or the unprotected picks that the Suns gave to the Nets when Durant is, would theoretically be in his late 30s. Just not a is not a fair it's not a fair assessment. I will say, however, that first off, before I get into that, what did you guys think of Indiana making this move?
Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it. I think in terms of style of play, this is a perfect fit. You mentioned Halliburton leads the league in transition assists. Obviously, the Pacers are setting NBA records for offensive efficiency. A lot of that is because they play fast and they've done a good job putting finishers and shooters around Halliburton. Siakam is an upgrade as far as the finishing goes. This is more stats and info stuff. 77 buckets in transition this year. It's the 4th most in the NBA. The best field goal percentage in transition among those with at least 75 attempts. He's going to be flying down the floor finishing. Buddy Hield, spacing it on the break. I mean, stylistically, it's a perfect fit. When you're the Pacers, you have to pounce when you have a chance to get star caliber players. And this whole thing of, well, hey, they could have just waited until free agency. When do the Pacers have success chasing stars in free agency? It's not a destination.
They just did free agency.
Yes, they did.
It just happened.
And now they have his bird rights. Now they can pay him more than anybody. Now they get him in there and he gets to play with Halliburton, sounds like very soon, hopefully, for the rest of the seasons. And I mean, it wasn't cheap, but you mentioned the 3 first-round picks. One is basically guaranteed to be a bottom 5 pick this year because it's the worst of the Thunder's picks. And then, they're hoping their own is in the 20s. Right now, I think it would be 19. And basically, they gave up a rotation player to get a all-star caliber upgrade. I think all NBA is a stretch, but an all-star caliber upgrade and a legit number 2 guy who fits well with their superstar.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is not like the Knicks and Carmelo Anthony back in 2011, right? Where you knew that if he got to free agency, the Knicks could sign Carmelo Anthony. The Pacers don't sign prominent free agents like this. Like I said before, it might be, I think Nate Duncan and Danny LaRue were talking about their pod. He might be the best player they've ever traded for in terms of accolades and accomplishments before he arrived.
Yeah. I mean, Indiana. They traded for Victor Oladipo, who ended up being a great player, but
Victor was nowhere. Victor was seen as a question. And they traded for Sabonis in the same trade. Turned out to be a great trade, but those guys were not anywhere near the accomplishment of Pascal Siakam. And frankly, Pascal's been a better player than Victor Oladipo basically his whole career anyway. So Victor had the 1 year before he got hurt. So this is a significant move from that standpoint for Indiana. And they keep Ben Mathurin and Jarris Walker. They're 2 recent mid to high lottery picks that they didn't obviously want to part with in the trade. If you go look at the trade Toronto
Ben Mathurin was the highest pick they'd had in 30 years.
Right.
And Walker's probably number 2 on that list.
Yeah. They hadn't had a top 10 pick or a pick inside the top 10 since, I think it was somewhere in the mid 80s. And
I think it was Rick Smits.
Yes,
it was like Rick Smits and George McLeod, like in the late 80s, I think.
Yeah, so it was a really long time. They obviously were always a very good team. So they keep those guys, keep them on the roster. And by getting Pascal Siakam, who is, as you guys both said, fantastic fit with Tyrese Halliburton, also a fantastic fit with Miles Turner, who's a very good floor spacing 5. And so Pascal's up and down shooting at times is much less of a concern when you're playing him next to Miles Turner. Mm-hmm. And the Pacers have been having Obi Toppin play power forward for most of the season for them. Pascal Siakam is a gigantic upgrade.
That's true.
Like you can make an argument that the Pacers are now right there with the Knicks, with the Cavs, with these other teams that are trying with maybe Miami, though I think Miami probably deserves the benefit of the doubt when healthy. But you can make an argument Indiana's the fourth best team in the East, behind, in whatever order you want, Boston, Milwaukee, and Philly. Like that's a very big move for this team to make, to get a guy like Pascal Siakam, who, as you guys also both alluded to, clearly is interested in staying there. They wouldn't have made this deal if he didn't want to stay there.
Okay. Timeout.
What?
Timeout. I don't think Pascal's given his interview yet. I know Masai had a press conference today. I don't think Kevin Pritchard or Rick Carlisle have talked about it yet because the deal got finalized late last night.
Okay.
Obviously, people are going to use the verbiage that you just used. Oh, I'm interested in staying, all this stuff. There's no way they make this deal unless they're certain.
That was what I was getting to. I mean,
basically, he's done everything but put the pen in his hand and signed it.
That's right.
The negotiations when free agency starts will take as long as to hand him a pen.
It's just like the trade the Knicks made. Like, the Knicks made that trade feeling very confident that OG Anunoby is going to be with their team long term. The Pacers, a small market team, doesn't make this kind of trade if they're not very confident that Pascal Siakam is going to be on their team long term. So, as you said earlier, Brian, they did their free agency now. They get a guy who is going to be able to fit perfectly with the way they want to play. Rick Carlisle, one of the more creative offensive coaches in the league, I'm sure is going to find all sorts of ways to use Pascal's skill set. They don't really have another guy on the team besides Halliburton who creates shots for people. Pascal's a terrific passer, can handle the ball, can do all kinds of stuff. He'll probably run the offense when Tyrese isn't on the court most of the time. So I really like the fit. And for Toronto, I mean, look, the Raptors should have made this move sooner. They should have got more for him, I think, than what they did, because, as you said, MacMahon, if you look at the 3 first-round picks, they're not 3 great picks. They're probably two non-lottery picks, one certainly at the back end of the first round. I just looked at it. The Pacers are tied for 18th right now in the lottery, and that's before they have Siakam on the team. And after Halliburton's been hurt, like, they've got a chance to be in the low to mid-20s at the end of the regular season. So you get 2 late first-round picks in a weak draft. You maybe get a swing on a top 4 protected pick in a couple of years.
Yeah,
but for an Indiana team,
the Pacers hope they're 3 non-lottery picks, and I think if you're looking at it, that's the most likely scenario.
So in European soccer, when star players change, not just European, world soccer, but more high profile in European soccer, when high profile players change teams, there's a bilateral negotiation. There's a negotiation between the player and the new team, which usually takes place before a trade is agreed to. And they agree on a contract. You know, Team A in Germany wants a player in Spain. The player says, I want to play for you. Here's the offer. And they agree to it. And then the teams negotiate a transfer fee. And, you know, these transfer fees, if they're for superstar players, get to 9 figures. Okay. So there's 2 levels of negotiations. That's essentially, even though it's tampering and nobody will ever talk about it on the record, that's essentially what had to happen here. With Siakam, he had to let it be known that he was prepared and willing to sign with the team that would trade for him. Otherwise, he would be treated as a rental, and he would not be traded for 3 first-round draft picks of any quality. So Siakam would have to say, I'll stay in Indiana. And how does he want to stay in Indiana? He gets communicated to him that they're willing to make an offer. You know, maybe there isn't any evidence of the Pacers saying, we will offer you a blank year contract for blank, but there is an understanding.
They probably didn't need to have that long conversation. Hey, you want to give him max? Yes. Okay, cool. Let's do it.
And so that's important, because if indeed the Raptors were willing, and they were willing, to make this pick for draft picks and expiring contracts, it leads you to wonder what other teams could have made such a move for Siakam.
Well, this is sort of the thing, though. There hasn't been a robust market for Siakam from the beginning, and that's why. Is that? Well, I think it's a couple reasons. One, I think there's been some concern with teams about paying a guy who's about to be 30 a 4 or 5 year deal on a very large number.
I think you're being charitable. I think there's significant concern, including from the Raptors.
Well, yes, that's definitely true, which is why the Raptors, I think, should have done this move sooner. I also think, for as good as Pascal is, and he's a really good player, he's also kind of a wonky fit on a lot of teams because of the way he plays. Like, he needs to have the ball in his hands a good amount of the time. His shot has been very up and down.
Yeah.
So we've talked about it with Evan Mobley, right? Like, if you're in Julius Randle, sometimes is like this too. If you're a suspect shooting or non-shooting four, it makes kind of an awkward fit on a lot of teams. So you combine the age, you combine the play style, you combine the fit. There wasn't a huge market for him. And that's why the Raptors, they take a deal that it's not a great deal, but given the market that was in place right now, and given the fact that when they traded OG Anunoby, it's very obvious what direction the Raptors are headed in, which is they're building around Scotty Barnes and to a lesser extent Emmanuel Quickly going forward. Didn't make sense to have Pascal on the team past the trade deadline. And so now they get him off the team now, and you've got Bruce Brown coming back, who you could maybe flip again. You've got Gary Trent. You could maybe move him. They have a month to sort of figure out what they want to do with their team.
Here's something to say about Bruce Brown. So Bruce Brown, $22 million contract, not guaranteed for next year, team option for $23 million. A player who had not produced at a high level in Indiana, had lost playing time. But a player who proved last year he can be extremely versatile player. Played 4 different positions for the Nuggets at times. Played all over the place during the postseason. Don't think he's got. I mean, I'm sure he'd like the Raptors to pick up that $23 million. I'd be very surprised if they did. But
it depends. Like, if he gets traded to a team, like let's say he gets traded to the Sixers just to make up a team, right?
Well, okay.
The Sixers.
Let's just say, what team would be interested in him? That's the the question now.
There's rumors about the Knicks, who have 40As expiring, and
he's in the same boat as Bruce Brown. He's got a team option for next year that you could pick up if you want to have it as another expiring trade contract too.
Sure.
Well, the interesting thing about Bruce Brown is that I talked about this with Bobby the other day. I talked about this in relation to Bojan Bogdanovic. The reason that a guy like Bruce Brown and Bogdanovic is interesting to the Sixers is because he gives them those players give them optionality.
Yeah.
They can trade for them and say goodbye at the end of the season, or, it's not hard to retrade them and open up cap space, or they can then hold them and their contracts then become ending contracts that could be used again.
Well, and Bruce Brown also has one interesting other wrinkle, not to get too wonky, where if you wanted to re-sign him, you could decline his team option, sign him to a longer-term, lower salary deal, and have him on your books for a while too. So you have a lot of flexibility with a good player who's proven to be a good fit on high-level teams. He was a key player for the Nets with KD and those guys before that. So whether it's the Sixers, whether it's the Knicks, I mean, he would look great on the Lakers if they could find a way to get him. Any of these teams that are like we talked about the other day, any team trying to find a guy who can hit an open three, even though Bruce isn't a great shooter, and be a versatile defender, that's a guy that fits on a lot of high-level teams.
And handle the ball some. He handled the ball a fair amount for the Nuggets last year, which is something that people didn't, people kind of looked at him as, well, he's a weird, undersized power forward, basically. And then he handled it a lot for the
played backup point most of the time.
Yeah, and a great cutter. He's a championship caliber role player. And the Pacers threw a bunch of money at him, and essentially what the Pacers ended up getting was a human trade exception. I mean,
which they just used.
Which they just used. And hey, they benefited greatly from it. Now the Raptors have a similar team building tool in him, and I do think there will be interest there.
I'd be surprised if he's on their team in a month. I mean, that's no reporting on my part. If you look at where they're at, they could definitely get, whether it's a young player or draft assets or some combination for him. And where they're at in their timeline, it makes a lot more sense to do that than to have them stick around.
That's one of the reasons why you do the deal now.
Right.
Maybe the Pacers also wanted Siakam in the fold for when Halliburton was coming back. I'm not sure how that goes.
Well, the more games they can have him play, the better. Like, there's no reason for them to wait.
Sure.
Right.
And for the Raptors, I mean, as far as trading Siakam goes, it's better late than never. Like I would be curious, and I'm not sure this will ever come out. I'd be curious to know if there's any difference between the package that Indiana had on the table I guess there would have had to been because Bruce Brown could have been it. Indiana was trying to trade for him over the summer. I'd be curious to know what that package was and how it compares to this one. But we can talk about the value of picks, et cetera, et cetera. It's not like the Raptors haven't had success with mid to late first round picks before, including Pascal Siakam, including OG Anunoby. I mean, they've got a pretty good track record of finding value later in the draft. And we can talk about.
It's a lot better than, like you said, it's a lot better than getting nothing like they got for Fred VanVleet last summer.
Yeah, and in the OG trade, they got two young guys who have played well for them and, have a chance to be part of their core with Scotty Barnes for a while.
Well, Masai Ujiri today, he doesn't speak publicly very often. He said in the press conference today that there would definitely be more trades before the deadline. That's an unusual, firm answer. But
I mean, Gary Trent and Bruce Brown both seem like very logical departures there to me.
Gary Trent's on the last year of a deal paying him 18.5. He also said that Masai also admitted, which this is, I'm sure was reported, but was certainly widely known within the NBA, that the relationship between he and Siakam had deteriorated. He said that there were basically very little communication over the last year and that he actually apologized to Pascal for it. Regardless of that, it's hard to, people were wondering if Pascal was going to get an extension. It sounds like he wasn't even talking to Masai. So obviously, the player and the GM don't have to talk to do an extension, but it's certainly, or not the GM, the president. Right. But it would certainly help. One of the teams that had talks with the Raptors, and it was reported, I don't know who reported it, so I don't know who to give credit to. I apologize. Honest failure. Was that
you'd make a crappy aggregator.
I know. I feel like if someone's going to aggregate a podcast on social media, they have to actually provide the audio clip in the aggregation if it's on social media.
Right, let's not get into an aggregation.
It's not hard to get
aggregation speech. I know. Let's not get derailed. Let's get to what you were.
But like inflection of the voice matters. Like,
Okay, let's move along.
Anyway, the Kings were one of the teams that had talks with the Raptors. It was reported by someone who I forget. Sorry. That
you just now are we?
I know. I'm just
we're back to the beginning.
I just want to set it. Just relax. Take a sip. That Siakam didn't want to extend there. I'm not so sure if he didn't want to extend there or the Kings didn't want to offer, because if they were willing to offer him what he wanted, I don't know why he wouldn't want to extend there. I'm not sure he's the perfect fit next to Sabonis, but it certainly would have been a talent upgrade. Probably would have replaced Harrison Barnes in one shape or form. But the Kings didn't get that done. The Kings have not done major roster upgrades over the last year. They have seen Keegan Murray play well in his second year. They have had several opportunities to upgrade the roster and haven't. And they're coming off a couple of brutal losses. Losing in Milwaukee the other night, where Dame Lillard hits like the 28-30 footer at the buzzer after they made a comeback in that game. That was where Mike Brown had been ejected and then brought the
laptop out.
$50,000 film session.
Yeah, which I appreciated, but
listen, I thought he got overfined. I guess he
got fined for 2 actions.
Yeah, he got fined as much for stomping around on the court as he did for that.
I know, but listen, the educational component of it, I thought should have minimized the fine. But go on.
The Malik Monk laughing while he was trying to hold Mike Brown back was maybe the most amusing part, even more than the laptop of that entire circumstance.
So they lost that one, Wendy, and then
they went to Phoenix, who I'm trying to explain to you how bad the Phoenix Suns have been in the fourth quarter.
Ooh.
It's like going to that Moneyball line. There's the Suns, and then there's 50 yards of bleep, and then I think actually there's a good team who's 29th. I can't remember who it is.
Well, we were texting about that game. I was at the Sixers Nuggets game, and I looked at my phone, and I was like, "Oh, they're down 20 with like 7 minutes to go." And then I was doing media post game, and these two started texting about the Suns winning the game. I was like, wait a minute, what?
So like,
hold on. You said they're down 20 and Wendy has a Sun story coming. Ha ha.
Yeah.
Oh yes, that we were texting because Brian had the Sun story coming. That is correct.
I had a Sun story published today, and of course, this was 2 days ago, and I was like, oh my God.
The window jinx appeared to be locked in, and then
anyway, the point is I think as of now, their net rating in the fourth quarter is minus 14. So per 100 possessions in the fourth quarter, you're getting outscored by 14 points per 100 possessions. The team that's 29th, I think, is 10. So they're like 40% worse
right now
than the team in front of them. And that includes this fourth quarter the other night where they did this 22-point comeback and beat the Kings. And trust me, I spent time
entering Thursday's action. The Miami Heat are 29th in the league, minus 10.9 points per 100 possessions in the fourth quarter. The Suns, after the game the other night, minus 14.8 per 100 possessions.
So it's basically 15.
Offensive rating 103.5, defensive rating 118.3.
Right.
That is not good.
And I had been writing in this story. I'd written a section in the story about how they had really been rolling up their sleeves, like in film sessions and in meetings and in brainstorming sessions. What can we do about this fourth quarter? Like Vogel was saying, we can't find one reason. It's with all kinds of different lineups and all kinds of different situations, and with our big three, without our big three, with two of the big three, with this lineup. So they're doing all this stuff to try to deal with this gaping problem. And then they come back from 22 down. Basically, Durant went off. And so the Kings get kicked in the teeth and then get kicked in the neck in back-to-back games.
By the way, Wendy, quick aside, your story had me in the first sentence headed to the dictionary. I did not know what stolid meant.
Stolid, I believe, is how you pronounce it.
I mean, shoot. I don't know how to say it either.
Yeah. Well, I was just, I was at this game where they played the Clippers, and the Clippers just curb stomped them, and they fell to 19-8, and they had just lost the day before to the Grizzlies, or 19-18. And they had just lost the day before the Grizzlies.
They wished to be 19-8
without Ja. I was the first game Ja missed, where he had the eventual shoulder injury, and they were just in a really bad place. The whole team was really, really cranky. Durant was in a surly mood. The whole team cleared out of the locker room within 10 minutes. I mean, it was a night in LA, so they were going out, but it was just real cranky. They were just not in a good place as a team. And Vogel was sitting there going, we're confident. We're going to get this done, whatever. And it just immediately took me back to that day in 2019 where he got hired as the coach of the Lakers. And Magic Johnson had that very day come out on First Take and just destroyed Rob Pelinka, called him a backstabber. The classic Stephen A's is there anybody else in the organization you're talking about? He's like, no, just Rob. It's just matter of fact. What'd you do yesterday? Oh, I played golf. Oh, just Rob. And so there's a classic. So first off, Pelinka's got to come up there and take on fire from the media about Magic Johnson just absolutely obliterated you 15 minutes ago on the number one rated sports show in the country. Your thoughts? And Frank just sitting there. He's got this face like business as usual. Then our guy, Dave McMenamin, and it's awesome. Dave asked a question. Dave McMenamin, ESPN. Dave goes, hello, Frank. Congratulations on getting the job. Rob, there was at least two other guys you wanted for this job. You wanted Ty Lue and Monty Williams, and you hired at least your third choice here. What went down with that? I respect Dave for asking the question. I highly respect it. I'm not making fun of it. I love that kind of question. But right after Vogel's got to sit there and watch his new boss bat away this flaming missile from Magic, he gets asked right in front of him, hey, you just hired your third choice. By the way, welcome, third choice. You just hired your third choice. And Frank absolutely never wavered for a split second, knew what he was going to say, and said, we're going to do A, B, and C. And one of the things he said was, I don't care about any of that. I'm going to build a defensive first team. We're going to be a great defensive team. They were the number one defensive team in the league. And yes, after COVID, they were the number one defensive team in the bubble and they won the title. And so I'm not saying it's apples to apples, but here I'm watching Frank Vogel, 4.5 years later with the exact same face, the same expression on his face, talking about his team that is 19-18 with, win or disaster type situation and going, we're confident. And it's the Vogel way. And there are indications that the Suns, now that they've got their 3 players, are turning it around. And their shooting percentages since with Beal on the court have just exploded. Mm-hmm. Grayson Allen, Beal's played, as we sit here and do this podcast, Beal's played 10 games since he came back from that ankle. He kind of had he had the back injury, then he came back for a minute, then it had another back injury. First game back, sprained his ankle. Since he's come back from that, they've played 10 games. They're 7-3. And in those 10 games, Grayson Allen is shooting 52% on threes, and Durant is shooting like 48 or 49% on threes. The space that happens out there with Durant, Beal, and Booker there together it's a dramatic difference. When now that Beal is on the court and can take some pressure off of Booker to be a playmaker, Booker's usage rate has gone from like Russell Westbrook 2015 Thunder, like down to a more manageable time. It's not like 33 anymore. He can and his production, his energy level has I think helped. That's part of the reason what was happening in these games. Booker was going to the bench in the fourth quarter and they had no playmaker. Mm-hmm. And these guys, part of the reason they were getting walloped in these fourth quarters was when Booker was off the court, the team collapsed offensively. They've softened that out a little bit. And Beal looks good. Like, he threw down a dunk in that Clipper game where he had great explosion. Like, my jaw dropped. Then the next game against the Lakers, he threw in 37, where he looked and moved really well to my eyes. And so, look, I'm not saying they're past it, but what I'm saying is Frank Vogel has been here before. He has got his process that they're working. And the thing that I've noticed as I talk to Booker, as I talk to Durant, as I talk to people in their organization, these guys are putting in the work. They are doing the film sessions. They are studying. They are coming in on their off days. There is a spirit to try to figure this out. It may not work. They're going up against a couple of awesome teams in the Western Conference, but just because they're 19-18, which they were, and they've won 3 in a row since then, doesn't mean that they're cooked. I actually think that they're progressing, if they can stay healthy, reasonably well.
Kind of a giant yes.
Yeah, well, that's the NBA. The whole NBA is a giant yes.
No, it's not. No, it's not. It's not the whole NBA.
To a certain degree, it is. I mean, we can say it's the same with the Mavericks. They've got 2 stars who have struggled to stay healthy. Kyrie and Luka have only played half of their 42 games as a duo of the Mavericks' 42 games. And we can go up and down the Western Conference, and there's a lot of those examples. I do think that was a great soliloquy. I think that's the proper usage of that word about the Suns.
You were very stolid during that entire soliloquy. Good job.
I was. There was also like a leaf blower going on outside, so I had to mute. But so you missed a few laughs. But I think, though, we were trying to talk about the Kings, and you went off on a Suns soliloquy.
Sorry. It's because of Bontemps. He opened the door.
It was a crazy comeback by the Suns. They do have some good things going. The Kings have gotten a little sideways here, and they have shown an appetite to be aggressive in the trade market. I don't know that there's a desperation from the Kings, though. I think there's a desire to pounce on opportunities, but Sabonis has still got prime left. Fox is just entering his prime. Murray, who they are very, very confident is a legit third star who's blossoming into being a third star, is just approaching his prime. Look, I think that they would have to be a real threat in the West this year. I think they'd have to make an upgrade before the trade deadline, but I don't think it is make that upgrade or bust as far as the big picture for that franchise.
look, Domantas Sabonis doesn't even turn 28 until May. So
Right.
they've got a lot of runway with the two of them and with Keegan Murray, who has taken some real steps forward and looks like a really, really promising young player on the wing where everybody's trying to find players. So, yes, they need to get better to be a real threat in the West. This is also a team that hadn't made the playoffs in almost 2 decades before last year. So, I don't think they need to sprint into making a move to try to incrementally improve right now. I understand why they would have been interested in Siakam. That would have been a pretty big difference making kind of piece, particularly if they're not giving up Keegan Murray, which they never were gonna to get him. So I understand making that kind of move. Otherwise, I would suggest that the Kings just be patient and let this thing percolate a little bit and wait for the right opportunities to come along to improve their team and not do anything rash, especially when their obligations from the Kevin Huerter trade are going to come off this spring when they'll give up a pick in that deal. And, some of their guys like Huerter has not shot the ball really at all the way he normally does this year. He's, I think, due to bounce back at some point in the second half of the year and play better. And, it's been a particularly tough week, but I think they'll be fine. And on Phoenix, I mean, yes, if their three guys are healthy, like we have all said from the beginning, they got a chance to be a really good team. But it's also not just a hand wave away. Oh, injuries happens to anybody. They've assembled a team with no depth and guys that get hurt all the time, as we've said many times. So yes, let's see if they can have a stretch here where they're all on the court. But it's not something to just dismiss as, well, everybody has injuries, so no big deal.
Well, yeah, I agree that they don't have the depth of like some teams, but Grayson Allen, he's having a pretty good season.
He's having a very good season.
Sure. He's having a really good season. They have like 10 players on minimum contracts. I think it's safe to say they don't really have depth. That's the whole point of their roster.
Grayson Allen is leading the league in 3-point shooting percentage at 6 a game. I'm sure that has something to do with the fact that he's so wide open. But
that's the idea, right? And
yeah, he's a really good shooter. Yeah.
Yeah, and they were fortunate that he was the player that they got, kind of the mystery player in that trade.
It was from what I understand in talking to the Suns, it truly was a mystery player.
Yeah.
They knew that the Trailblazers they knew they were getting Jusuf Nurkic.
Right.
And they knew they were going to get one more player. And they knew who the Blazers were talking to, but they didn't know who was in the deal. So like the Suns were like literally studying Raptors players. Like, what happens if it's Gary Trent Jr. that we're going to get? What happens if it's this team's player? Like, they were preparing for like multiple players. Like, who's going to arrive? Who's going to arrive on the plane that we send to Portland to pick up Jusuf Nurkic? And they were thrilled that it was Grayson Allen because, he's having a career year this year. Also, and I know that this is wacky, and Bontemps, you can knock 500 holes in this, and I really don't have anything that I can say, but the best 5-man defensive unit in the NBA this year that's played over 100 minutes together, and I know 100 minutes isn't a lot, but Beal, Durant, and Booker have played 9 games in the same. So is on the Suns. And that is Booker, Grayson Allen, Durant, Nurkic, and Eric Gordon. You would not think that would be a good defensive lineup. And I'm not saying if they play him another 100 minutes, they would still be number one. My point is, like, they have these little things that are going on that are successful that Frank Vogel and those guys are trying to figure out how to put together. And these pieces are still all over the board. They are just figuring out where to put it in. By the way, if you spent 20 minutes, you could probably find some fourth quarter lineups that are among the worst. I'm not saying that there's not some things on the Suns they're on the opposite, but like there's fingerprints there of something that can go on. Now, at the standard, being the Nuggets and the Clippers, which are the classes of the West, selling the idea that they're going to outlast one or have to be both those teams, I agree it's a tough sale, but it's January. But I would be very careful counting the Suns out of anything right now.
Well, yes, you've made that clear since September, so we are aware.
I'm glad we're allowed to talk about the Suns because before you said they had to have 20 games as a star trio under their belt. So I'm glad you
I
lifted
say
the
they need to have 20
bridge.
games before you can even begin to think about judging how they're doing.
Yes,
Now,
yes.
They've got
just
9
set it all
games.
aside.
That trio does have a plus 14.5 point net rating in 175 minutes together. We can go through lineup data and find a lot of reasons to be encouraged about the Suns, and I say that with seriousness. Look, we were discussing Kings. We took this detour over to the Suns.
Sorry.
It's fine. But my point is, if you're asking me like which team, if I had to bet on one or the other to come out of the West, which one would I bet on? It'd be Phoenix, and I don't think that'd be a difficult decision. If you ask me who would you want to bet on over the next 5-year window, then it'd be Sacramento. For obvious reasons, because KD will be 40 in 5 years.
Sure.
Yeah. What about 2-year window? Because that's what this is, really.
I got to mute the leaf blowers back.
He doesn't want to answer that question, Bontemps. I mean,
look, well, Phoenix is in an immediate window, so they've got
over the
this
next
year,
15 years, I'm betting on the
see what happens next
Lakers
year.
over the Timberwolves. How about that? How about that hot take?
That is a very hot take.
I'll bet on the next 26 years. I'll bet on the Celtics over the Magic, and upset all the Orlando fans.
5 years.
Speaking of the Lakers, they've potentially found some stuff.
5 years is like the rest of Sabonis' prime. We all know how much you love Sabonis.
Once again, having my words twisted. I was just simply saying that Sabonis doesn't stink.
We're not doing that.
Like the way you
move on to
you
the
guys
next
acted like they traded a bag of balls.
It's
for
not.
Halliburton.
That's also not what happened. We don't need to relitigate that. Please go on to the next thing.
I know this. Sabonis is one tough dude because Draymond stomped and jumped on him, and you hurt your ribs worse when you fell on a boat.
Oh my God, it hurts so bad.
There's no arguing that.
All right. Anyway, Bontemps mentioned the Lakers. They have won several in a row here. Darvin Ham was kind of forced to going back to his opening night lineup. Cam Reddish went down with a knee issue. And so he started the season playing Austin Reeves and D'Angelo Russell together. They were getting destroyed in first quarter after first quarter. So he broke them up, put Reeves on the bench. They had a little bit of success, but then kept getting destroyed in first quarter after first quarter. He took D'Angelo out of the starting lineup and brought both of them off the bench and moved LeBron to point guard. LeBron's production slid. All of his numbers slid as he had to play point guard. They really weren't much better in the first quarters. So he brought Reeves back, and then after Reddish got hurt, brought Russell back, who'd been slumping for basically 6 weeks. And since he's done that, Russell's had 2 of his best games of the season. And Anthony Davis's assist totals have ballooned. Now, Anthony Davis is having an excellent season. His number is almost exactly the same as last year in terms of points, rebounds, assists, blocks, what have you, with the exception of games played.
I was going to say that's the difference. He's been on the court.
So he's putting up numbers at Anthony Davis level, and LeBron is playing in every game, putting up LeBron numbers. But the Lakers are 500 because they just couldn't score. So the last few games, D'Angelo's refound it, and all of a sudden AD is racking up assists. I think he's got 25 assists the last 3 games, the most that he's had in the 3-game stretch in any 3-game stretch in his career. That's because he's throwing the ball. The ball's coming inside. He's kicking it out to a guy who's making the outside shot. And for I think the 3rd time this season, I think it's the 3rd, Darvin came out after the game and said, "This is going to be my starting lineup for a while."
He's had a lot of commitments to start in the lineup, so that's for sure.
D'Angelo Russell is a high variance player. He's been a high variance player throughout most of his career. And with the way the Lakers are constructed, if he's going well, they're going to look good, especially if AD and LeBron are healthy. If he doesn't go well, they're going to struggle to score. Right now, they're running hot, and it just so happens to coincide with the time when the Lakers were getting pretty serious about trying to trade him, quite frankly. But they haven't traded him yet, and they might not trade him because they might not be able to find a deal that fits. But that's what's happening right now. And so they do play the Nets, who are going through a hell of a run right now. But the Lakers are still in this stretch where they're playing all these games in Los Angeles, and there's still a chance for them to get a little bit of traction before the trade deadline.
Well, we've seen over the past couple of years that there's a couple constants with the Lakers, right? One of them is they're not a good three-point shooting team. They don't shoot high volume. They don't make a lot of them. But with D'Angelo Russell shooting well, that starts to change, right? He's had, like you said, he's had some good games recently. Him and Austin Reeves are hitting shots. That changes a lot of what they're doing. The other thing we've seen consistently is the Lakers really do well against smaller teams, right? You go back to last year in the playoffs, obviously Memphis had a bunch of injuries in the front court. The Warriors were a small team. Lakers did really well in those matchups. On Monday, they played the Thunder. Thunder, terrific team. We've talked about them a bunch, but they're not a very big team on the front line across the board. Lakers have a couple wins against them, have played well against them. That game on Monday, they forced Oklahoma City to shoot a lot of threes. That's not really what the Thunder like to do. And that matchup worked pretty well for them. Dallas, same thing. Smaller team. Obviously got Derek Lively at center, but he's not a massive guy. They're playing Derek Jones at power forward. He's not that big. Like they're just not that big, right? So those are matchups that work for them. The other thing is those two teams combined to go 26 for 89 from three. And so if the Lakers are able to physically pound teams inside and force them into being jump shooting teams, and those jump shots aren't falling, they can look like a really good team. That's the formula they have to take. Now, when you look at going through Denver, which is not a small team, they have to figure out a way.
They are the opposite of small.
That's right. That's why they're a very bad matchup for the Lakers, as we saw in the sweep. So they still have to figure out a way
Did
to
they get
combat
swept?
that.
I didn't know that.
They did, believe it or not. But they do have a formula when those two guys are healthy. Like we have seen over the past couple of years, when they do play good teams and they're able to use and leverage that size against these smaller teams, they have had success even against teams you'd think they're not going to beat. So if you are a Laker fan looking at it, like that is, I think at this point, what you have to say is a pretty constant positive for this group, that if they get the right kind of matchup, they can really lean into it and take advantage of it because just how big and imposing they are across the front line.
Well, there's one third constant with the Lakers, and that is that our colleagues will drastically overreact to any little dose of Lakers success.
You got
Gotta
that
have
right,
hope,
buddy.
Tim. Gotta have hope.
B block of First Take today. I was on, and what do you think the lead topic was? It wasn't the Siakam trade.
Are the Lakers winning not just one championship, not just two, but the next 3 in a row?
I'm looking at the ESPN NBA account. They tweeted a clip from the NBA Today show, the Malik Andrews production today, and the quote is, "Are you picking the Lakers in a Clippers series?" Which reminds me of the debate last year, right around this time, when the entire panel picked
the Lakers
in a hypothetical series against the freaking Denver Nuggets. Listen,
the Clippers have only won like 90% of the matchups against the Lakers in recent years, but
the Lakers are not beating the healthy Clippers in a playoff series. Keyword in that is healthy, right? And that gets back.
That's an if. That's an if.
Well, listen, they have a similar level of if to the Suns with their guys always being.
Well, but again, we can talk about the Pelicans with Zion in particular, as well as their other guy. I mean, everybody's got questions, and a few of these teams have huge questions, but the Lakers have played well over the last few days to get back to 500. Let's just keep that in perspective. To get back to 500.
That's right.
That's true.
Why we'll keep banging the drum.
The reason it's relevant for us who don't prioritize the Lakers and occasionally have banned talking about them is because they are out there being one of the teams that you could see making a significant move.
Yeah, they are dangling the pick, the first rounder that they have available. They're certainly dangling D'Angelo Russell, which, as far as I can tell, has not generated just a ton of interest around the league.
Yeah.
Well, it's why I'll just keep
not dangling Austin Reeves.
Right. Well, it's why I'll just keep banging on. What they have to do over the next 3 weeks to have a chance is find volume 3-point shooting that can at least sort of stay on the court at the other end. That's what they have to try to find, because their 3-point shooting is non-existent, and you can't win in today's NBA if you're dead last in attempts and dead last in makes every game. You just can't.
Even with two superstars, if you're that poor of a three-point shooting team, then the MAC-10 seed nickname will be appropriate.
Unless you are absolutely killer on the defensive end, which they were last year.
But they're not going to be good enough to beat bigger teams that way. Like we've seen, again, look at the formula. If you want, like if they get matched up with smaller teams, they will have a puncher's chance because of their size. But if they're going up against a team like Denver, they got to have more shooting. They got to have more scoring. And they have to have those guys that can actually hold up at the other end of the court. Because they just get more guys that can't guard anybody, then they're in the same position they're in now.
And you mentioned that they match up well against the Thunder. And the Thunder have taken another massive leap this year to the point where like they are in the conversation of contenders. Which I like the idea of them taking a big swing before the trade deadline, I think is a waste of breath. But the idea of them looking for some, an enforcer type, I think is something that could be considered there. Chet Holmgren is having arguably the best center or the best season ever by a stretch rim protector. And that's a lot to say about a rookie, but I think it might be true.
Have you guys kept an eye at all recently on Mr. Wembanyama?
Oh no, since he's been a 5, his production.
I mean,
especially
guys,
on a permanent basis,
he's playing well, and his team continues to be annihilated.
But just
okay, fine. I don't care.
Well, I'm not saying it as a knock on him. It's just that's the truth. The other guy is playing on a team that's going to be first or second in the West at the rate they're going.
Yeah,
that's all.
Yeah, he's playing with a guy who might win the MVP.
I agree. It's just it's no knock on Victor. Victor's playing great. He's going to be awesome.
The idea of being able to occasionally slide Chet to the 4 against certain matchups, I think is appealing.
Yeah, I mean, look, they have a very small team across the board, and if they are going up against a team like the Lakers or frankly against Denver in the playoffs, like when Brian's talked a lot about it, when you're rolling out there with Aaron Gordon and Michael Porter Jr. and Nikola Jokic at 3, 4, 5, that's a big ass team across the board. And the Thunder have a bunch of wings and Chet. Like they could use a little more bulk up front. Doesn't mean, like you said, they don't have to empty the war chest to do that. But if they could add some size on the wing or inside between now and the deadline, I do think it would help them in these kind of matchups in the playoffs, because it is going to be a real thing for them to combat. And we have to start looking at them like that kind of team, because they're going to be in the playoffs, and they have to start looking at, okay, how do we match up with these teams? And frankly, if you're looking at it over the next 3 to 5 years, because certainly Oklahoma City's looking at this from a longer term view, it's not like Denver's going anywhere. Like that's the team you've got to be measuring yourself against going forward, and their size isn't going anywhere either. So that's something that they have to think about.
Denver is one of those teams, when you see them play live, it blows you away. Like they're, obviously anybody can watch them on TV. Well, not anybody, but
not anybody in Denver.
Wendy says when you see them live, because that's the only way you can see them.
When you see them play, like I remember the first time I saw them live when they had those 3 guys, Gordon. This was like 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Like after the trade, I was like, damn. Like, that what their size is. You watch them play on TV, but until you actually see how it impacts angles on the court, I remember I saw him play in a game in Oklahoma City. It was a non-important game. The Thunder were no good, but like I was watching like the way that they got into passing lanes and stuff. And that was back when Porter's back was hurting him and he wasn't moving very well. It was like, I mean, it's a real thing. Speaking of the Nets, I know, Bontemps, that you have talked about, boy, they should try to pull Dorian Finney-Smith out of Brooklyn, the Lakers, or anybody.
Anybody. Yep. Any good team.
I was rejecting the idea that the Nets would sell players, but I don't know if you've kept an eye on the old Nets of Brooklyn. But
let's just give it the 15-second recap. Since they tanked the game against the Bucks, they're 1-9, and in their last 3 games in the United States, they lost in overtime to Portland, overtime to Miami, and just lost at the buzzer to Portland on Wednesday night. And in the game that wasn't in the United States, they were intentionally fouling Tristan Thompson down 20 in pairs. So
that game
that's
was
what's
never
going on with the
competitive.
Nets.
That game was never competitive. By the way, in that game against you were at that game against the Heat.
I was at both of those games, the first two, not the one in Portland last night.
Okay. What was the score of that game at the end of regulation? It was 80. It was 88.
It was either 86. It was 88, 88.
It was in the 80s. Yeah. It was a 1990s game.
Listen, it was 50. It was 45-31 at halftime. The Heat went 4 for 22 in the second quarter and didn't make a three in the first half, and the game was competitive.
Well, that's when I proposed to you, gentlemen, a new rule that any team that doesn't score at least 90 points in a game, I'm going to revise that to say in regulation, should be fined. It should be a fine.
It is pretty much impossible to do
regulation in today's NBA. You should be fined.
It's a very difficult feat.
Or fans should be able to get their damn money back if they bought a ticket.
I like the latter. Let's do that.
Yeah. So just as a recap, they were 15-15 when they elected to play guys a few minutes at the start of the game, which they got. How much did they get fined? $100,000.
$100,000. They tanked the game, got fined $100,000, and have gone 1-9 since then. And now we're about to go into a very brutal stretch of schedule.
That's 2 public film sessions.
Yeah. So, and now they've begun a West Coast trip where they're going to now be in LA against the Lakers and Clippers on Friday and Sunday.
That's another small team for the Lakers to feast on inside.
That's true. So
the Nets are now 8th in the lottery odds. And of course, that means that Houston has the 8th best lottery odds.
That's
Who
right.
would have thought going into the season that the pick that the Rockets own, that is the Nets, would be better than the pick that they're sending to Oklahoma City?
The one thing I will say is after they get back from LA for these 2 games, they do play 10 of the next 11 games at home.
Oh, they've got a huge home court advantage, especially right now.
Especially that first game against the first games against the Knicks.
Definitely be a big time home court advantage. No one will take the subway from Manhattan.
I mean, the question is look, I don't think they're if they trade Dorian Finney-Smith, they're crazy. If they put him on the market,
why? Wait a minute. Why would it be crazy?
Because he's a very valuable player who has a very good contract.
He's a valuable player to a good team.
Yeah, what's the argument for a mediocre?
They want to be a good team next year.
Look, straight up, here's the Nets' problem. There's no benefit in them being bad because the Rockets own all their draft capital. If not for the disastrous James Harden deal, then they would be able to say, look, time to blow it up and probably, want to keep you're talking about you want to keep Bridges, you want to keep, this guy or that guy and rebuild around them and you'd be fine with bottoming out. But bottoming out is just salt in the wound of everything you gave up for James Harden.
Guys, I can't speak to what the Nets are thinking right this very second, but the word through the NBA is the Nets are attempting to be buyers.
Well, listen, the Nets leadership, when they took over the team after Billy King and Bobby Marks got let go, had all their picks sent out. And they were very happy to lose 1 billion games and give up top 3 picks to the Celtics because they didn't make any trades for those picks. But now that their picks and their trades are on the books, now we're looking at things differently. To me, that is not the way they should be looking at it. They should be looking at it as we need to be trying to reorient this team, trying to get stuff as we can for the players we have on our team. And frankly, Dorian Finney-Smith is never going to have more value than he does right now with the time he's got left on his contract and the fact that there are not a plethora of options on the market for teams to trade for. Now, to your point, doesn't mean the Nets will do it.
His teammate is Royce O'Neal.
Well, right. Like if they could they have a lot of wing players on their team and they could get a ton for Dorian Finney. Like, look, if they made some trade with the Lakers involving D'Angelo Russell in their first, the crazy thing is, we've, I think, very fairly analyzed how D'Angelo Russell is. However, the Nets don't have anybody who can really create offense on their team. D'Angelo Russell would be an actual upgrade for them and would probably help them win more games
Ben
than Evan Dorian
Simmons has
Finney-Smith
entered
on
the
the team
chat,
right
sir.
now.
Hold on.
Ben
Cam
Simmons is
Thomas
their franchise
Cam
point
Thomas
guard.
says, hey, they could start D'Angelo Russell and Cam Thomas and then have Bridges guard 1 through 3, and I mean simultaneously.
Well, listen, Cam Thomas shoots the ball. He doesn't create offense for anybody
He'd be
else.
switching. He'd be doing the switch on pick and rolls. He'd be switching with himself.
Yes.
But my point is that, like MacMahon said before, if you have Dorian Finney-Smith, he's the kind of guy like Bruce Brown that's really going to help a good to very good team.
Yes.
Or like OG Anunoby with the Knicks. You put him on the Knicks, a good to very good team. He's going to amplify your really good players. He's going to hit spot up shots. He's going to defend. He's going to fill in gaps. He's going to help you a lot.
He's a great player to play off of stars. He's a great complementary player.
On a mediocre to bad
team. Yeah.
Yeah. On a mediocre to bad team, he's just not helping. So I think it would be very wise of the Nets to go that direction. We'll see what they do over the next 3 weeks.
And it really does get down to this. They're getting killed by both James Harden trades. The one where they gave up all their draft capital to get him is just, it has them paralyzed. And then the one where they moved him and now they're stuck with the bloated carcass that is the Ben Simmons contract. Both James Harden trades are absolute killers.
Well, if you go back and look at where Philly's at, we didn't really talk about the game on Tuesday with Denver, which is a heck of a game. But if you look where Philly's at right now, even though James Harden left and they ended up trading him and getting the stuff back, like the situation they got themselves into with James Harden compared to just never being able to move Ben Simmons and what like that other potential path they were on, like it's remarkable the difference in the two situations. And they're just if they were stuck there, who knows where we'd be talking about where Joel Embiid and the Sixers would be at. And that's where the Nets are at, where they just have had Ben Simmons has just been a zero from the moment he got there.
The Suns have plenty of assets. The Mavericks, I'm sorry, the Suns because of the Suns picks. The Nets because they have all that Sun stuff.
Right.
They have Maverick stuff.
But they have assets, but bottoming out doesn't benefit them because they don't have their own picks.
Which is why I don't think they will.
Right.
Which is why I don't think they're trading a guy who's a highly valuable player who's on a very good contract.
Well, I guess my argument is I don't think they're going to bottom out if they trade Dorian Finney-Smith. They're just going to get stuff for him.
Right. He's not. Yeah. They're a bad team now, and they have to operate as a bad team. They have to you can't fool yourself into thinking you're a piece or two away when you're as bad as they are.
Well, they were 500 at Christmas and were protecting their players for a long run. So I don't think they view themselves as a bad team.
Well, the standings do.
Bontemps, you mentioned the Nuggets-Celtics game on Friday. You were at the Celtics-Nuggets game in Philly on Tuesday. One of the more enjoyable games to watch of the season. Came right down to the final minutes. Jokic and Embiid going back and forth. Embiid playing on the second night of a back-to-back and approaching the game like it was a early round playoff game. Won't say late round playoff game. Just came out wanting to kill. Had a 40-point, 10-assist night. It's funny, his 30-point, 10-rebound streak. How long was that streak?
Why won't you say late?
16 games.
Because he's never been in one. 16 games?
16 games in a row. Tied with Kareem for second all-time behind Wilt, who did it 5 times more than that, which is another amazing Wilt stat.
Right. Anyway, his streak of 30-point, 10-rebound games ended, but his double-double streak stayed alive because he had 10 assists, 40 and 10 assists.
And his 30-point streak extended to, I think, 18 or 19 in a row. I don't remember exactly how many it was.
Yeah, that's getting in pretty historical territory.
Yeah, I mean, look, Joel is playing at an unbelievable level. And his jump shot at this point, it's a shock when he doesn't make it. I was texting with a couple people during the game on Tuesday. At this point, he's almost like Kevin Durant plus 100 pounds. Like, he's unbelievably skilled. He can score at all 3 levels. He's creating offense himself. He's got one of the best jumpers in the league. I mean, it's remarkable the weapon he's turned himself into as an offensive player. And Nick Nurse has him handling the ball and moving the ball more, some out of necessity because they only really have him and Tyrese Maxey to handle the ball, and some because Joel's made real strides as a passer. So I'm very curious. We got 3 weeks till the deadline. I don't think they were ever going to get in on either of the former Toronto guys, OG Anunoby or Pascal Siakam, but those guys are off the board. Going to be very interesting to see what the Sixers do. How do they upgrade this team? How much do they upgrade this team? What moves do they try to make? Because there's a real opening after Milwaukee lost Wednesday. They're tied in the loss column, I believe, with Philly. The real
Milwaukee
opening
was down by 47.
Right. No Giannis in Cleveland. Good win for the Cavs. But
Cavs
we'll
have
see.
won 6 in a row.
Yeah, Cavs are playing well. But there's an opening for Philly to get to second. So let's see what happens with the Sixers. Can they make some moves to get that 2 seed, which I think could be super important for them? But they obviously have to upgrade this roster if they want to compete with teams like Milwaukee and Boston in the playoffs and be a real threat instead of just being sort of in between the group of teams behind them and Milwaukee and Boston in front of them. And you said it earlier, just watching Denver up close, because obviously I don't get to see them nearly as much as MacMahon does because I'm out east most of the time. It's so fun to watch them play because the way they move the ball and the way they play, and they're kind of like later stage LeBron teams now, where they've played together for so long. They're all almost feels like they're on autopilot a lot of the time, and they're just going through these games, not going through the motions, but like they just know what to do and how to do it. And they've got all these guys on the floor who can make plays and shoot from the perimeter. And it's super fun to watch. And, it does feel like we've all kind of slept on them a little bit. And people are talking about the Lakers and talking about the Clippers and talking about the Thunder. No, I just mean for how well they're playing, because they've, like LeBron teams of old, like the Miami teams that I believe were never the 1 seed in the East, they're sort of just biding their time to get to the playoffs. And I sort of wonder if they're not going to have a similar run through the West playoffs, if assuming health, that they did last year, because they're just going to be head and shoulders above everybody.
Nobody's worried about
that time of the year. Right.
Well, but you mentioned they got a bunch of shooters around Joker. They got a bunch of cutters, which is just as Aaron Gordon is like the chemistry that those guys have. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the number of dunks that Gordon gets because him and Joker are on the same wavelength and he's cutting to the basket and Joker.
He had like 4 in the game Tuesday.
Yeah, Joker,
it was amazing.
I think there have been games this year where all of Aaron Gordon's baskets were dunks and he didn't have three baskets.
And they're coming off 5 or 6 from Joker. Obviously the 2-man game with Joker and Murray's phenomenal. Michael Porter Jr. is an underrated cutter. He's really good at not only moving to get open for threes, but he's an underrated cutter. And then Joker's the best passer in basketball, period. Not the best 7-foot passer. He's the best passer in basketball, period. Yeah. But the Sixers, it's funny. Embiid has become, he's not Joker. There's nobody else that's Joker at that position. But Embiid is averaging 6 assists a game and has become a phenomenal passer. And it's crazy. Embiid is maybe the strongest dude in the league, 7'2", is averaging 35 points per game, shooting 54% from the floor, and has only dunked 15 times in half a season.
That's an amazing stat.
It's like, but his 15-footer is damn near as efficient as most big men around the basket.
You just never think he's going to miss when he shoots that elbow jumper. Like
it's not even a jumper. It's just a little set shot over it. No one's getting to it.
By the way, that was the
he's played 900 he's played 991 minutes, by the way, and has scored 1,017 points. He remains over a point per minute played, which no one has done since Wilt the year he scored 100 points in a game. It's the only time it's ever been done.
That was the second best stat I heard this week, MacMahon. The best stat I heard this week was on our broadcast of the Lakers-Mavericks game on Wednesday night. I didn't see this in our game notes, but I assume that this is from Stats and Info. LeBron James has played against 35% of all of the players in NBA history.
I saw that too. It's jaw-dropping.
Now, that hits me on several levels. One, it's amazing. Secondly, how old I am. Because I've been covering the league as long as LeBron's been in it.
Yeah.
And
you've covered 35% of the players in NBA history.
Well, it is funny. Like when you just think about it, I hadn't really thought about it besides going, holy cow, that's a huge number. But with the way rosters have expanded and the fact that he's played like what, close to a quarter of the history of the whole league, like you start to think about it that way. It's like, yeah, like it does sort of make sense from that standpoint, just like purely from a number standpoint, but it's just an unbelievable stat.
I guess the league is 77 years old. He's played in 21 of them.
Yeah, so it's up around.
Right. 30%. Obviously, at the beginning there was 8. There was not 30 teams. There was 8 teams or whatever. But
yeah, now there's more teams. There's more bigger rosters, etc. But still, like it's amazing.
I wonder how
many LeBron last to play against someone else's grandson. Like he's played with all these guys' fathers and sons.
Right. Yeah, I was gonna say there's been a ton of father-son pairings.
Well, he played with someone's grandson. Is there like a guy who was like 41 when LeBron started, and if he gets like year 25, like it'll be like a 19-year-old grandson who's coming?
There might be. Also, hey, LeBron might play with it. He might end up playing with his own grandsons. The guy ain't slowing down.
I have to say, it had to be a pretty cool moment for him. Post game, he's giving his interview, his post game interview, and he's like involved in the interview talking about their win, and he's watching Bronny on ESPN. USC. I don't remember who USC was playing.
Arizona.
They're getting their butts kicked by Arizona.
Yeah. If you hadn't heard the interview, somebody goes, "How's Bronny doing?" He's like, "He's doing okay." "How's USC doing?" "They've been better." By the way, it reminded me when LeBron was giving, comprehensive answers while watching and commenting on his son's play. It reminded me of one of my favorite LeBron moments. I told the story on First Take today. It was just an average game in the middle of the season, right about now in Cleveland. I think it was the second time around. Might have been the first time around though. Who knows? It was like somewhere between 8 and 12 years ago. And we're in the post-game locker room doing the interview with LeBron post-game. And there was another NBA game on that was on the big screen in the Cavs locker room. And it was the last second play. It was like a last possession. And it was a side out of bounds play. And LeBron, in the middle of the interview, in the middle of an answer, goes, "Oh, they're going to run a side pick and roll here, and it's going to be a decoy. He's going to reject the screen and go around and hit the guy on the backside." It wasn't like, "Oh, they're going to throw the ball to Jokic." It was not like, baseline level analysis. And if I remember correctly, it was not like an Eastern Conference team. It was like a Western Conference game, like a team that he wouldn't necessarily know. And like when I say the play, I wish I could remember the exact details. The play played out exactly. It was exactly what he called. And I think the guy missed the shot, and so it'll be lost to history what it was. He, in the middle of an interview, like glanced up at the TV and exactly predicted a play. I was like, and I remember I did a story about LeBron's incredible memory, and Chris Bosh told me a story about like watching NFL games with LeBron, and like, they'd be watching Indianapolis play Minnesota, and like this guy from Minnesota, like the safety would come up and make a big stop, and LeBron was like, "Yeah, man, he was all conference at Colorado State." And Bosh was like, "What? Like, this wasn't Troy Polamalu, like it was, so anyway, I liked that moment. It brought me back to when I hadn't seen.
Well, a lot of the all-time great players, whether it's him or Jokic or those guys, like it's their. I mean, people don't talk about it quite as much, but it's their mind that separates them from everybody else, and the way they see the game and the way they can spot stuff happening before it happens. And those two guys in particular, like you watch LeBron and you watch Jokic, like that's a big part of what makes them special is they can see what's happening 5 steps ahead of everybody else. It's why Jokic does that pass the other day where he is literally just staring at half court and just throws it over his head right there in Gordon because he just was like, well, I saw him a few seconds before and I just assumed he'd be there. Just threw the ball. Like nobody else is doing stuff like that. So it'll be very fun to see them play Boston tomorrow. Many people thought that would be the finals last year. I certainly thought it would be. And we will see if it's the finals in a few months.
Maybe we will.
Always disrespect.
Well, the 8th seeded Heat going into that series. I think it's fair to say most people were not picking them to win. BPI certainly was not picking them to win. There it is.
Yeah, well, I thought even when it was, it was 3-3, and I thought, okay, well, they're still going to win. They're still going to go to games, win game 7. Anyway, all right, we'll talk about all that as it comes up. Thank you to Bontemps. Thank you to MacMahon. Thank you to Jackson, our producer. Thank you for listening this week, and we will talk to you soon.
Adios, amigos.